Welcome everybody on the Zoom call and everybody here. This is our first meeting since July of last year. So I don't know if anybody else has been out and about, but this is one of my first meetings, and I hope you enjoy it today. I got to talk to two different places at the same time. New people. First of all, I want to thank Lillian. If people in the Zoom meeting, we are in Lillian's new office. This is Lillian Montalto, and she's offered her office to us today. It's brand new, it's sparkly clean, it's full of marble, and it's wonderful. Let's all thank Lillian for allowing us. I also want to thank some of our sponsors. I don't see Mark, but Mark Lepp of the Salem 5 Bank is a sponsor. And then Kim Carpentier of Cross Country Mortgage. Kim is here. This one, would you like to say a few words? Hello, welcome back. Everybody. Kim has 9 grandchildren, and he just got to see them all after a long period of time.
Good week last week.
Yes.
Good for you.
I'd like to thank Gary Campbell, who just came in. Hello, Gary. If you didn't know Gary, we're going to talk, he's going to talk later, but Gary is a key member of the association, past president. He donated the wine that we're all going to have here upstairs. So that's what you're missing down in the Zoom meeting. So now I'd like to talk, part of today's meeting, we're going to talk about what's going on in our government. Let's talk a little bit. Last night, our president told us his agenda for what he's got going on, or what anybody caught anybody. Any of it I did a little bit. It all sounds great coming out of somebody's mouth. I think the hardest part is how we're going to pay for it. And it's really probably not going to be me, because I'm 60 years old. But Kim, your grandchildren are going to be sharing the brunt of what's going on today. That's what I think. But locally, we have some state representatives and government officials at the State House that would like to recognize. And so first, I see my friend. I live in Carlisle, and I work in Westford. And my longtime representative, Jim Acero, just voted to the housing chair in the House of Representatives. So Jim, if you'd like to say a few words and say hello, that'd be great.
I would. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm sorry if I look a little ragged today. Some of my colleagues are here today. I think I saw Representative Minicucci might be attending today too. We finished our budget last night around 2:45 a.m. And so my daughter, who's 5 years old, got me up at her usual 6. So I'll do the best I can here with what I got. But I just wanted to introduce myself, Jeff and Lillian. Thank you for inviting me to this. Jeff's been a longtime friend, certainly a big supporter of my district, my community, of myself. He's done so much great work with Habitat for Humanity. And I just wanted to, thank Jeff for including me today, and Lillian for putting this together. I'm new as the chair of the Housing Committee for the House of Representatives, appointed by Speaker Mariano, but I've been on Beacon Hill for almost 25 years now, working in Senate Ways and Means, working in the House of Representatives of Legislative Aid. And in 2008, I was elected to the Massachusetts House. My district is the town of Westford, my hometown, the town of Littleton, and portions, precincts 5, 7, and 8 in the town of Chelmsford. Just a few things I think would be important, just meeting with you folks. I've been doing the tour, if you will, to various housing advocacy groups, housing stakeholders, et cetera. And we've had, I think, a few meetings already. I've had it with Ben and Jeff already, but I just wanted to put names with faces and, continue a dialogue. It's been the first time, I would say, Kevin Honan was the chair in the House, and Ben might have a better historical perspective on it, but Chairman Honan was the chair of the Housing Committee for almost 18 years. And before that, I believe it was Representative Cahill from Beverly. And then before that, I believe it was held by a representative from Boston for a number of years. And so I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm the first chair of the Housing Committee that is from the suburbs, and probably decades upon decades, maybe 30 to 40 years. So I'm an open canvas to a lot of housing policy issues right now. I'm on the listening tour, if you will. I'm proud of the work we did in last session on passing housing choice legislation. I know that a number of you here and the association as a whole were very instrumental in that advocacy and that effort. And I hope that, as we move forward, we can approach the other side of this pandemic with a commitment to increasing housing supply statewide. That's certainly an issue that I hear from my constituents. That's an issue that I'm hearing from stakeholders across the Commonwealth, and something that I share with my colleagues as well. Producing more housing is the best way for our state to approach our existing housing crisis and retain talent throughout the Commonwealth here with the young people and keeping people and affordability here in Massachusetts. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to shape the housing policy agenda. And I'm going to rely on folks like yourselves to give me some additional expertise on how to accomplish that. The Joint Committee on Housing has recently started receiving all of its bills. So we're up around 175 bills or so, and those are being put forward into subject matter. And as everybody knows, it's been difficult with the pandemic. I'm at the State House today, but I'm not even in my housing office yet. We haven't officially moved to our offices. The majority of my staff that I've hired over the last month or so a lot of them are still working remotely, and the other half are here at the State House. So next week, we're having our first official meeting, if you will, with members of the Joint Committee on Housing, with my Senate counterpart and co-chair John Keenan from Quincy, and he's been really a delight to work with so far, and we share a lot of the same views on things. And so I look forward to working with him and meeting the rest of the committee too as a whole. Again, it's the first time I've chaired a committee, so I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the challenge. We're now going to be setting our hearing schedule in the upcoming weeks as we put things into appropriate categories. And I look to working with all of you. Last night we had I talked a little bit on the top of $47 billion budget was passed last night in the House. Some of the highlights I wanted to share with you a little bit was we did some historic investments in housing and homelessness issues, specifically $84 million for the operating subsidies for housing authorities, $56 million for homeless individual shelter system, and increased funding for rental assistance to divert evictions. These are things that a lot of I would say in the height of the pandemic, you folks all know, came to a head, coming to the end of our session in December. And there was a lot of things that I think really at the 11th hour we were able to pass. And a lot of that I would say is that there's just been such a backup of legislative matters in this last legislative session. And of course, that was just getting our arms around the pandemic and, understanding how to operate a little bit differently and figure out ways to have legislative matters dealt with. I would never have thought that we were going to have 160 state representatives all call in our votes or have that option to call in our votes. And when you have legislators in the chamber, as I'm sure most of you folks know, your legislators or worked with the legislature, obviously, in your time in the workforce, is that legislators are like herding cats in the House of Representatives. So think about it all on a phone calling in. It's probably a little bit more easier to get people together and get people for votes, et cetera. But it's been a challenge, just like everything. And I think if you were to look back at 2 years ago, you probably wouldn't be thinking we'd be having this meeting on a Zoom. So I look forward to working with you folks. I have an open door policy. Jeff, obviously, and Ben Fierro and the membership here. I would be more than happy to have meetings on any subject matter you would like and continue to have an open dialogue. So I just want to introduce myself, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Let's all welcome Jim.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you in person shortly, Jeff.
I look forward to seeing you in person too, especially in the top of the show, Jeff. You were admiring all of the sort of new details to that conference room, right? Marble, etc. So I'd like to see that in person as well.
Gorgeous place. Next we have Barry. We're in Andover, Jim, and we have our representative from Andover, Barry Finegold, who wants to say a few words. Barry.
I just say before Barry starts, he is one of the best. Barry, great to see you.
What's up? We should stand to make sure they can see me.
Kevin's right there. You're right in front of me, Rob.
So first of all, I also want to thank Lillian for hosting us. What a magnificent building, and very excited. If you haven't been upstairs yet, you're in for a treat. So thank you for having
My
us.
pleasure.
I also want to thank all of you for coming here today. It's really nice to do a meeting in person. I will say that I'm incredibly optimistic about the future, not only of the Merrimack Valley, but about Massachusetts. The one thing for sure is that, when you look at the economy in the next 5 to 10 years, fundamentally our state is doing great. Biotech, education, these are the industries that are going to drive us. So I think we should feel very good about where we're going. There's a couple of things I just want to mention about, last session, just building off what Jim said. Well, I think we should feel very proud about what we did with the housing choice bill. And Ben played a huge role in helping get that passed. But for a lot of us for people that wanted to have housing developments, to reach that 2/3 number to do a rezoning was next to impossible. The fact that it's majority now is a big deal. So I think thanks to all of you, Ben's work, that's reality. That's really good. I think one of the other things that we have to continue to work on, I know this is a painful one, is we need to have better response time for our utilities. I chair a committee that now deals with that, with the internet and cybersecurity. And we want more responsive and fair dealings from our utilities, whether it's Verizon, whether it's National Grid. We want to make sure that these companies are responsive. The final thing is that I too watched President Biden last night. Being a Democrat, I like him, but I was very concerned. We said at 10:31. I think that's a huge mistake. I think that's going to be bad for the business. I think it's going to be bad for the economy if we do away with 1031 exchanges. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to reach out to our congressmen, our senators, and tell them that's a very bad idea. And it's penny wise, pound foolish. And so once again, everybody wants infrastructure, but I think we have to be smart about it. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for having me here. I look forward to working with you. And once again, very, very nice to you all in person. I look forward to many more meetings like this. So.
Do we know if Christina Minicucci is Carol? Do you know? Ben, do you know anything about Christina? You're muted.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I couldn't hear your question.
Representative Christina Minicucci was supposed to possibly join us. Do you know if she was joining us or not?
I didn't hear from her, so I don't know what her status is.
All right, before we get to Ben though, hello Ben. You're gonna be put on hold just for a second because I want to introduce you to Rob Brennan, who I know. Ben has to leave. Well, I don't see Ben in here, just so you know, Carol. Ben would like me to see that, according to Carol and on my agenda here.
It's Carol's fault.
So Ben, would you like to give us a little primer on what's going on at Beacon Hill or up in Ipswich as you're corresponding to Beacon Hill?
I would be delighted, Jeff. Let me just ask, can folks hear me fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Because on our end, the audio sort of keeps cutting out and is crackling. So I didn't know if there was an issue on your end, but I know Rob's having the same problem. Well, thank you. This is convenient to be able to meet with you this way, and it's great to see everyone. Thank you, Jeff, Lillian, Carol, everyone for giving me this opportunity. I can't wait to be with you in person at Lillian's office, at Lindsay's, at wherever we can get together in the future, because I enjoy it so much. And it's terrific that we had Senator Finegold here. He has been such a stalwart supporter of this industry for so many years, both when he served in the House of Representatives, when he served in the Senate for his first stint, and then of course coming back again. He's a terrific guy and a great friend, so we're very fortunate to have him. And he understands, you know, he understands your industry, certainly as an attorney. And it has been my pleasure to begin to work with Representative Arcero. Yes, I had a chance to work, or the pleasure of working with Kevin Honan for 18 years, with then Representative Cahill, Mike Cahill from Beverly for 5 or 6 years. And our new chairman is correct. I believe he is, the best of my memory, and it goes back a long, long way, as many of you know, I believe he is the first suburban legislator to chair this committee. In fact, when I started doing this work in 1981, and Ed King was governor, this committee was called the Urban Affairs Committee. Over the years, it changed into the Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, the HUD Committee, and then eventually into the Housing Committee, which it is today, and he chairs. And he is so fortunate to have as a Senate chair, Senator Keenan from Quincy. I know him well. He's an attorney. He served on the city council in Quincy. I believe he was even an assistant city solicitor. He has had a great interest in housing issues. And over the past number of years where we dealt with zoning reform, I have to say he was one of the, to be quite candid, senators who would be willing to sit down and listen to me for an hour, get into the minutia of special permits and variances and grandfather protection for subdivisions and so on. He was a strong supporter early for the housing choice legislation. And of course, without the support of Representative Arcero and the members of the House, that would not have come to fruition. So, you know, we know that's not a cure-all, but we are excited about it because I do believe that our members will have the opportunity to go into their community, go into a community where they've identified a parcel which isn't zoned in a way that's going to work for housing now, but work with the town planner, work with the planning board, work with the selectmen, gather that municipal support to go to town meeting and seek that zoning change. And now a small vocal minority won't be able to stop it. We've seen over and over good projects die because they get a majority vote, but they can't get that 2/3. So we think that's a terrific change. The other piece of that, of course, is the part of that law that mandates multifamily housing zoning for MBTA communities. And we do think that this could be, again, another great opportunity for our members to do some smart development, smart zoning, multifamily, some mixed use near MBTA train stations, another opportunity for us. Representative Arcero was so kind to give me a few weeks back, I think an hour of his time to begin my advocacy on some of the issues that we've worked around for so long. Because obviously in the suburban communities where we need housing, you know, zoning is so much the issue that we confront. And, you know, I'm looking forward to working with him and the other committees on that. You know, and Representative Arcero touched on this. We've always known and we've advocated, and I think people recognize that housing is needed both for quality of life, to bind our communities as an economic driver and engine for our economy. But I do believe that the pandemic that we've lived through for the past year and a half has really brought to fore that housing is more than an economic issue, it's more than a community issue. I think we've come to appreciate that it is truly a social justice and public health imperative. And I hope that some municipal leaders will understand that better now than they have in the past as we try to build housing for everyone. I'm not going to go into all the issues here. There's one obviously incredibly important issue that I know Rob is going to talk about that. And that is, of course, the passage of the major climate change legislation earlier this year, and the mandate to the Division of Energy Resources and the Board of Building Regulations and Standards to promulgate a zero net building code, a specialized stretch code that eventually will be incorporated into the base code in, I believe, 2030. I'll leave that topic for him to talk about. I just want to mention that probably our number one legislative priority. And we did file a package of 10 or so bills, some of which will go to the Committee on Housing, some will go to municipalities and other committees. But probably the number one priority for us is passage of a Permit Extension Act, similar that was passed back in 2010 and 2012, dealing then, of course, with the impact of the credit crisis of 2008, and of course, the Great Recession. This legislation, which we're working on jointly with NAIOP, the Commercial Real Estate Association, would extend for 1 year after the termination of the state of emergency, which the governor declared, if you remember, on March 10th of last year. And as things are improving, obviously we have hope that maybe later this summer, potentially the emergency will eventually be lifted. What that would mean under this legislation is that any real estate development project that had an approval or had an approval on March 10th, 2020, or subsequently was approved, the life of that permit would be extended for 1 additional year beyond whatever remaining term is in that permit. And that's important to us because obviously COVID sent this industry back as it sent back all industries. And those projects that have gone through the lengthy permitting process, both state and local, and again, projects that were approved should be able to move forward and be built without having to go back to the starting line to get approved again. This was remarkable legislation passed in 2010, really unprecedented, but it proved to be helpful. What we saw, of course, is that 2 years wasn't enough because we didn't come out of the recession, and the legislature extended it for 2 more years. And we had many members who benefited by, again, projects that were approved, but where because of the market or financing, they couldn't move forward. Eventually, those projects were able to be built. So I would say that that is our number one priority. And I'll just wrap up by mentioning something else that we're very much keeping an eye on with other groups. And that is the proliferation of home rule petitions being filed by individual communities. That is, they're seeking permission from the state, right, to the legislature, to enact local bans on further installation of natural gas. This is obviously of great concern. Our customers need and want clean, reliable source of energy to heat their homes. That means natural gas. And proposed bans will only make that more difficult and add cost to that and really impact housing availability and affordability. Not that we don't support and embrace other technologies such as ground-sourced or air-sourced heat pumps. Obviously, many of our members are beginning to do that, but overwhelmingly, we will need for the near future the availability of natural gas. You all remember that the town of Brookline had adopted a bylaw to ban any future installation of natural gas to new construction. That was challenged, went up to the Attorney General, and she struck it down as impermissible. So they're trying to do an end run around that by filing a home rule petition to get the authority to do that. And just one other thing related to home rule petitions, we're seeing more and more home rule petitions for communities to impose surcharges on building permits, surcharges to fund affordable housing in the project. It is a tax. It is a tax on building permits. It is a tax on new homeowners and new construction to fund affordable housing. We need and support affordable housing. This association supports housing across the entire spectrum, but imposing surcharges on building permits is clearly the wrong way to go about it. So that's some of the things we're watching out for, but I did want to mention the Permit Extension Act is our number one priority. And I'll leave it there so that Rob can talk about what we're doing in our focus regarding the energy code. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Ben. So Ben is our lobbyist. I should have introduced him better if you didn't know that yet. Sorry about that, Ben. Which means he's our paid adversary.
Adversary.
Fight to be our advocate down at the State House. And he has many adversaries, I'm sure. So he does that for us. He told me earlier last month that he had something like 2,000 bills to go over. Jim Macero mentioned that almost a couple hundred that he has to go in his committee. Ben has to look at 2,000 bills, and these are not easy reading. This isn't your Vanity Fair magazine that he's reading. He's reading 2,000 complicated bills, looking for any problems that are going to pop up with our members. If he doesn't do it, nobody does it. And the next thing you know, something we would find out about it on the back end, which would be terrible. So I want to, he'll never get the applause he deserves, but at least let's give him something. Now, I'd like to introduce Rob Brennan, but before I do that, let me just tell you a backstory that Rob doesn't even know. My parents lived in the Cape for 30 years, and one time we found ourselves in Dennis, and my father said, hey, stop the car, go this way, and I had to follow his direction. We went all the way across Dennis from the Bay Area to the ocean side, and he said, look at this project, I want you to see this project. And it was a beautiful project. I have no idea what the name was, but we walked around, Rob, we walked around, they were just starting to have people move in. And it was a gorgeous project. That same project is now touted by Massachusetts Department of Housing as one of the projects that they want to emulate throughout the state. I'm sure you'll tell us the name of the project, Rob, but Rob became a developer from a lawyer. He didn't make enough money in the law, so he said, I'll be a developer now. And he's now a developer. I serve with him on the Government Affairs Committee. He's my boss. I'm head of the Wetlands and Waterways Group, and he's doing it's a difficult job. He's doing an outstanding job, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what he's doing, and I think he's going to concentrate on this issue of net zero housing, which is going to prop up, what the impacts of that are, and his different take on it. Instead of fighting it, he has embraced it. And I'll turn it over to him now. Thank you, Rob Brennan, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. I think you have the economics wrong in terms of developer to lawyer. But in any event, as Jeff said, I practiced law for the first 20 years of my career in mostly in Boston, firms like Palmer and Dodge and Goodwin Proctor. Left and set up my own firm with some partners from Goodwin that is still up and running today. My partner, Dan Dane, former partner, Dan Dane, leads that, and Dan has been a friend of our organization. But I am, very much the new kid on the block in terms of my work with the mass home builders. I think it's going on into my third year. But I do have the benefit and the privilege of working alongside folks like Jeff and Ben Fierro, who I think was not mentioned yet, but I think it's his 23rd year, if I'm not mistaken, serving as counsel and lobbyist for the organization. So we have the state, or at the state level, as Jeff mentioned. We do have what's called the Government Affairs Committee, and it's made up of members of the executive board, made up of representatives from all of the locals are represented. It's broken down, into a number of committees, and it is worth mentioning that if an award is being given out this year for work and accomplishments, it certainly is Jeff Brem. Whose Wetlands and Water Resources Committee has not only been tracking and been engaging with the state, with DEP, in particular, on a number of issues that I hope he'll be speaking to, or at least mentioning. But it includes both significant accomplishments that has happened with regard to Title V standards. And important issues that the home builders and housing development voice through Jeff has been extremely well represented on issues of significant importance, including proposed changes to stormwater management that have the potential of adding 5 figures to each developed lot. But at every meeting, the voice of the home building community is channeled through Jeff and the work of the subcommittee and the work of our committee at the government affairs level. Other subcommittees under government affairs, standing subcommittees, 40B and zoning, which Mark Kablak chairs. Mark, again, very seasoned attorney, and Mark monitors and brings to the state level concerns, whether it's recent case developments and case law, or proposed local or state regulations as it might impact housing development. The Utilities Subcommittee is chaired by Mark Leff. Mark is a senior vice president at Salem 5, who he serves and interacts with all of the state utilities. So whether it's issues as to how EverSource is changing their workflow and the impacts of changes in workflow management, when we have builders, who are seeking connections and could be waiting days, weeks, months, or more for these connections. We have a voice, and on many occasions, if builders of any of our locals are running into issues, we have the ability, it's channeled up to the state level through the local executive officers. And we do, through Mark, have a voice directly, into the highest levels at the utilities. A couple other, committees that we've had over the past year. One, formed a little over a year ago, and that was an ad hoc committee, with regard to COVID-19. And in the early days of COVID, you'll recall there were essential workers and essential industries, that were able to continue their work. And through Ben's advocacy and interaction, with the administration, in the earliest days of COVID-19, we were able to include home building among those essential services. So for many of our members, hopefully all of our members, that kept their crews working. For homeowners, it kept housing continuing to be produced, renovations to be continued, but we did it in a very safe manner. So, we also developed a training that was endorsed by BBRS as a credible course, but that drew on national protocols, that drew on developed state best practices among members, and presented that into video training that we produced at the state level. We had volunteers, new members out of Burlington, Susan and Paul Cadillac and their company Cadillac Homes, that has an incredible social media presence, and they had in-house film crews and animation crews, and we turned that into really a top-notch training video that again allowed our members to continue working and to continue working safely. But as has been alluded to both by Jeff and by Ben, one of the newest committees that we have formed has been the Net Zero Subcommittee. And the work there has been to work with the new climate legislation that was passed by the legislature, first at the end of the last session and now and again at the beginning of this session, which directs DOER and BBRS over the course of the next 18 to 20 months to develop a net zero code. Would be an optional energy code that cities and towns could adopt. And for those of you that might not know exactly, what does net zero mean? It means a combination of increasing energy efficiency through hyper insulation, through more highly rated systems, electric heat pumps, but even more highly rated electric heat pumps. So reducing the amount of energy that it takes to heat and cool and operate a home, and then to offset that, in theory, with energy that's either created directly on the home, rooftop solar panels, is a classic example, or is generated somewhere nearby. As Ben mentioned, one of the greatest accomplishments, and again, the support of Representative Arciero and Senator Finegold in getting housing choice passed and reducing those thresholds, from 2/3 to a simple majority, really is paving the way for great advances in more attainable housing development. So the concern, was that with great steps forward in housing attainability and housing production, what will the impact of these additional costs be? on housing attainability. So the policy or the approach that we are developing, on the state level, is that the costs associated with moving to net zero should not, in and of themselves, constitute a reason not to adopt the code. But what we, hope that the administration, and the legislature will look at in parallel, while this code is being developed, is a mandate, for DOER and BBRS to, number one, assess the cost of every new requirement, that's being put into a net zero code, so that decisions are being made with at least an awareness of what these costs will add to housing production. Then to cumulatively, look at all of the additional costs that a net zero code will bring to housing production, and housing production across, that entire scale. And there clearly are, products and when you're selling high-end $1 million plus homes, additional costs are absorbed a lot more easily on a build like that than they are, in a workforce project or in an affordable housing project, where those additional costs might simply cause some projects not to pencil out, even at market rate for markets where housing affordability is really tight. So again, first to look at the cost of every new requirement that's being added. Second, to look at the cumulative impact of those costs on housing attainability and affordability. And third, to stand ready and to develop programs to mitigate against those increased costs. And a great example of the power of programs that provide things like tax credits, that provide low interest loans for retrofits, that would provide perhaps a more robust mass save rebate program. The great example is to look at what happened with solar between 2007 and 2018, where the costs of solar production and adding those panels were very expensive. Not a lot of crews doing them in 2007, 2008, 2009, 10. It took a while, before you saw a solar city, van kind of sitting on every corner. But the success of that program, because you had 30%, federal tax credit, you had 10 years of renewable energy credits, you had low interest loans, and you had robust rebate programs, is the Commonwealth was able to go from 2 megawatts of rooftop solar production to 2,000 megawatts. But that was made possible, because of the mitigative programs that were wrapped around it. So over the course, of this next year, we'll be working at our committee level. We'll be working with the administration, with the legislature, and working with institutions on the outside. We're in discussions with several educational institutions to take a look at study, and educate the public. What does it cost to build now? And those of us sitting in the room know that April 2021, the cost of construction are at the highest levels they ever have been. What will those costs be going to with net zero, and what are the programs that can mitigate it, so that we can have both climate policy and housing? And kind of that and housing is becoming, our buzzword or buzz term, that we hope will be attached every time that climate, is discussed. And there's no reason that we can't have both. There's no reason, that these can't both be advanced on parallel paths. And, there's every reason in the world or every motivation, in the Commonwealth to take these off of any opposing, vectors. This should not be advances in climate at the cost of housing production, with thought and with programs and with the continued support of the great legislators and folks in the administration who have been supporting housing for all these years, and just continuing that in a way that works and meshes with net zero climate policy. So that's the major thing on our agenda for the year ahead. Again, I'd invite anyone who'd like to bring any additional concerns to the Government Affairs Committee. We're here. We're all ears, And we've got a great team to help advance a lot of issues.
Thank you, Rob. We have a great leader, huh?
Thank you.
Rob was pushed into this role. He helped. He was on the government affairs committee just for a couple of years, and we said, "Hi, how do you like to be chairman?" And it's a lot of work, but you're the perfect guy for it, and he is. So thank you very much, Rob. Next, I don't know if all of you know, but you should know Andrew Chabin. He's our sort of local celebrity. You didn't know this about him, perhaps, but every time I've been to National, I think 3 years in a row, he always gets the stage. Now, the stage is a big stage. There's a few thousand people there. It's an enormous stage, and they're always calling Andrew up for one thing or another. I think last year there was a new governance. They were going to change the whole structure of the federation. And who's in charge of that? Andrew, of course. So Andrew was our celebrity down at National. He was past president of this association. He's currently chairman of investments of NAHB, our national association. He's vice chair of budget and finance, past chair of federal government affairs, trustee of National Housing Endowment, and sometimes he takes Carol's calls. So I want to welcome Andrew Chabin, who's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at our national association.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe about half of what you said. First, I'd like to welcome Senator Finegold. Barry's a dear friend, and while he and I may see issues a little differently at times, we are both very much pro-housing, and I truly appreciate Barry's support of the organization. It's very nice also to see Representative Arcero here, being one of the multifamily owners both in Westford and in Chelmsford. We've had an opportunity to see him firsthand, and having him in the housing picture, I think bodes really well for all of us around the table, that's for sure. And Lillian, the place looks great. I wish I could be there, but I'm working on a capital transaction for the project that you and Bob and I developed together. So I'm going to be up late doing that. So I'm here on Zoom. My role today is to give you an update regarding NAHB's issues and a little bit of the organizational issues that are going on at NAHB as well. And would invite comrades Campbell and Katie to jump in at any time to support or refute what I might be saying. First, the biggest issue on the plate, and Jeff touched on it, is the Biden tax plan. $1.5 trillion. I think the hamsters are going to be running overtime down there, running the wheels and printing money. And there are some good things in the bill regarding HUD and, or the proposal, I should say, and the low-income housing tax credit. But there are some very serious headwinds coming regarding a step up in basis, regarding a personal gifting exemption being moved down from the $11.6 million that each individual gets now. And probably most troubling, and I think one that might actually have real traction, is capital gains tax moving from the 20% at the federal level to a proposed 39.6% number, which would really stymie the issue of investment sales going forward. So I can say that along with the lumber issue, which I'm going to touch on in a moment, that has moved to the top of the Delta Pledge class for Jerry Howard and for Jim Tobin, our CEO and chief lobbyist. The lumber issue is one that cannot be ignored. Lumber's moved up. There are various different numbers, but NAHB's number is 188% increase in the last 24 months. In lumber, Larry would probably tell you that it's probably more than that. The issues behind it are probably the most important thing that I can bring to you. In 2008, 9, 10 timeframe, many of the sawmills shut down and they were not refunded, and nobody really invested again in plant and equipment. And so you have a very reduced supply and you have a massive demand. All one needs to know in this, sort of pandemic induced issue here is walk into Lowe's or walk into Home Depot or take a look at their stock. And I don't mean stock, I mean stock market for these companies. It has gone through the roof, and you can barely find things on the shelves these days. And much of that dates all the way back to the issues of 2008, 9, 10. You couple that with people being home and taking on more do-it-yourself projects, and you find yourself with very significant shortages of many materials. Lumber is the one that stands out certainly the most. The third major issue to bring to your attention is federal regulations. At the moment, NAHB's estimate is that $36,000 is the cost of the price of a house, increase in the price of a house having to do with federal regulation. So just think, step back and think about what the average price nationally of a home might be, and the average is $36,000 of that house has to do with federal regulation alone. Obviously, many of those regulations were curtailed in the previous 4 years. You can only imagine how busy NAHB is going to be beating back the issues having to do with federal regulations going forward. On my side of the fence, on the multifamily side, it's $15,000 added to the price of a multifamily unit, or translate that into $114 a month in rent increase, or rent that we would need to be able to justify building new. So think about that number in terms of an average rent. That's a staggering increase to try and make numbers work going forward, just based on federal regulation alone. And there's a lot of other issues that are being worked on: air quality, climate change, stormwater, waters of the US, which is the navigable waters issue, land use issues, OSHA issues, and green building issues. So there's quite a bit there to sink our teeth into coming up with the new administration and the new Congress. There have been some significant wins as well. The CDC eviction moratorium on the multifamily side, all NAHB members are exempt from the CDC eviction moratorium. That does not mean that if a state has a particular moratorium that you would be exempt from state law, but on the federal level, all NAHB members are exempt from CDC eviction moratorium law, which is just an enormous win nationally. And that was done with the Pacific Law Foundation as a partner with NAHB, and really proves the value of membership in this particular case on the multifamily side going forward. A few other things to quickly point out. There's a terrific podcast going forward that called Housing Developments. Housing Development is a podcast by Jerry Howard and Jim Tobin. I would suggest that anyone who's interested in sort of updates from the national level you can subscribe to that through nahb.org using your membership number. It's free, and I find it tremendous. They usually have about 2 a month, and it's not only informative, it's actually kind of funny as well. So it's quite good. What you see up on the screen, just moving back quickly to the eviction moratorium, what you see up there is the NAHB blog that comes out, NAHB Now. The Justice Department provides clarity to the Ohio District Court ruling on the eviction moratorium. If you scroll through that, you'll see where it specifically talks about NAHB members being exempt. Just an enormous win. And for those of you who are not getting these NAHB blogs, all you need to do is, again, log on to nahb.org, and you can sign up for all of the ones that make sense for your business. And I find them tremendously helpful going forward in my business. Want to remind you, and Gary will touch on this a little bit later, but Bringing Housing Home, which is the sort of home-based COVID version, if you will, of our normal visits with our federal Congress folks and senators, will happen between May 3rd and May 7th. Gary, Larry, and I are certainly going to be a part of each of those. All of you are welcome. If anybody would like to participate with any of the legislators going forward, let Gary Campbell know, and he will add you to our Zoom for May 3rd through May 7th. On the organizational side, the June meeting, which was going to be in Washington, D.C., is now going to be strictly virtual. The October meeting in Houston will be live. There's been some spirited debate about when it is appropriate to get back together again. I would love to have been with you today to do that. I think as people begin to see that it's safe to do so, it will be NAHB's policy to get back together again. However, Many of you know that NAHB's International Builder Show for this last quarter had to be canceled. That is more than 50% of the revenue to NAHB, and sort of being the leader of the Budget and Finance Committee this year, it has been interesting to deal with what amounts to a $20 million structural budget deficit for the National Association. The good news is that our investments are strong. The good news is that our reserves have been strong, and they're put away for these kind of not just rainy days, but massive storms. And we will be able to sustain, making an assumption that the International Builder Show does come back strong in February of 2022. So with that said, Mr. Brem, if anybody has questions, I'm here. And if Gary and Larry have anything else to add to the national report, that would be great. But other than that, that is my report, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody. Andrew Tatum. Andrew, as I said, he represents us all at the national level, but he's a Northeast member. You are very well represented in Northeast by many people. Larry, you're not on my agenda, but if you didn't know, this is Larry Cady. He is our national representative for Massachusetts, also a Northeast member. So hello, Larry. I'd like to introduce now Gary Campbell. He's from Campbell Real Estate. His father has been one of the founding members of this association back, I think, in the 50s. Gary's the past president of here, NEBA. Currently, he's the Area 1 chairman, which he's going to tell us what that means. He's also on the Housing Finance, Federal Government Affairs, and Climate Change Task Force. And I believe he was past president of the Multifamily Council. And he's head of our Build Pack at the state. These people do a lot of work. Believe me, they're very busy. Gary Campbell, welcome.
Great to see you all, and really a privilege to follow everything that's gone before. And I think you're getting a really kind of almost unique and really well-rounded flavor of how NHB works on your behalf on all the different levels. Because if there's one message I have for you this evening, is that you know how all those different efforts are integrated and how they're all part of the same, kind of pattern and effort that we all require. We exist in one of the most highly regulated industries there is. And what is the trend right now? The trend is it's harder and harder to build. It's more and more expensive to build. Whether it's regulatory costs, as you heard about from Andrew, whether it's lumber costs that we've all experienced, whether it's appliances, whether it's labor shortage, whatever it is, it's getting harder and harder to build. So what's absolutely critically important is that we are able to advocate for ourselves at all these different levels. You've seen, from Ben Fierro, for example, and others, Rob Brennan, Jeff, working for the state. One of the most critical things that happened last year was that due to the efforts of the Home Builders Association of Massachusetts, residential construction was determined to be an essential service. So pretty much everything else got shut down in the economy, with the exception of maybe the police or the hospital or what have you. But in addition to that, home construction was allowed to continue. So this really, in many ways, saved the livelihoods of many of the members. This is not something to be discounted at all. This was not a straightforward, easy decision. It was done by Ben, done by others, in conjunction with the Baker administration. Other states, they didn't do it. So we have a lot to be thankful for there. Really an incredible win for the people in the association. And just as this kind of effective advocacy is taking place at the state level, as you heard from Andrew, and I'm happy to talk to you about, as you know from Larry, because Larry spends so much time as well, and Andrew really is so highly involved at so many levels, at such a high level. The efforts that are made at the national level, cannot be underestimated. I know from personal experience that the government affairs people, the legislative advocacy staff at the National Association of Home Builders is incredibly effective. I can't tell you how many meetings I sit in on where we have senior HUD officials, White House officials, all these very high-level officials come to the meetings and talk about how effective NHB is, how well prepared they are, how well respected on the Hill, You know, we're very lucky to have that level of advocacy because they're highly effective. Andrew just gave you a kind of a laundry list of all the different issues that they've been working on and will continue to work on with a great amount of effectiveness. And, you know, as I say, you know, we're very, very lucky to have that. And I've been on calls where, you know, talking about something like the eviction moratorium, which Andrew mentioned, we have senior White House officials on a conference call. There's like 20 of them. And you have senior White House officials. You have, you know, the number 2 at HUD. You have all these different people. I mean, you know, I sat in a meeting with the director of the FHFA. Now, the director of the FHFA oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are responsible for kind of soaking up 70% of the 30-year mortgages in the United States. So think about that. I mean, without Fannie and Freddie, the 30-year mortgage market would not exist. Think about how hard it would be to sell a house under those circumstances. But here we have Mark, his name is Mark Calabria. He was, you know, sitting with like 10 of us, talking for an hour about what he was doing and how he loved NHB. He actually worked for NHB at the time. And, you know, he talked about all the different initiatives and heard our input on so many different issues. So, you know, it's really important that we, you know, kind of understand that all the different elements of legislative advocacy, understand, you know, what we personally can do, you know, to kind of contribute to this cause. So let me give you a couple of examples. So next week, there's, as Andrew mentioned, there's, you know, bringing housing home. It's going to be a series of meetings that we're in the process of still setting up with, you know, members of the congressional delegation in Massachusetts. We won't get to all of them. In fact, it's been challenging to schedule them because they don't find out their legislative schedules. And so, like for next week, they didn't find out till yesterday. That it was hard for them to schedule a meeting. But I will tell you, and I hope you put it all on your calendars, Tuesday morning at 10:30, we're having a Zoom meeting with Lori Trahan. I exchanged texts with her this morning just to confirm it. She will be there. So I invite you all to join in. You know, Lori is very engaged. I know her very well. Andrew knows her very well. You know, Larry knows her. You know, I was kind of one of the first supporters of her when she ran. And she's terrific. She's been very responsive to our issues. So I would welcome all of you to join in. Zoom call, do it in the comfort of your home, and you know, you can make your voices heard. Now we have a couple of other meetings scheduled with people like Catherine Clark, you know, with Bill Keating down the Cape, and we're going to be working on some more. So bringing housing home is an important part of our overall effort, because what do we need to do more than anything? As you've seen from Representative Marcero, from Barry Finegold who was here, we need to engage. We need to get, you know, the legislators to understand, you know, what it's like to try to build a house and what we have to go through, you know, to build a house, to bring the American dream to people in the United States. And the only way we can do that is to engage with them. And so we have to make that effort. As you can see, they're very open to it. They want to talk to us. They want to learn from us. You know, we're very reasonable. And all we want to do is build. I always say to people, this is an industry that's not trying to keep people out or keep competition out. This is an industry that wants to build more, which is not the case with every industry. So that's something we have going for us. You know, so we have to continue that effort. At the same time, as part of, you know, what we do on the national level is we have something called BILPAC, and that stands for Political Action Committee. And I think, you know, many of you are familiar with it. I've done some fundraising. You know, we've done wine tastings at my house. Probably do another one this summer. Hopefully. Yeah, sounds good. And it's a way we can raise money. And, you know, whatever you can donate, it's fine. We want to get participation more than anything. And what that enables us to do is, you know, in the last election cycle, so the 2-year cycle ending 2020, we raised over $3 million. And we were allowed to give that money to, you know, members of the House, members of the Senate, that we think, you know, we can influence and get in front of, you know, through the BILPAC effort. So I'm the BILPAC trustee. You know, there's also, you know, one other from Massachusetts. And I can tell you that that effort is really important. Again, get engagement, get our issues in front of all these different legislators, and make sure we have our voices heard. Because if we don't, we're in trouble. You know, and I know Andrew mentioned it. I'm currently, you know, we just had our first meeting today. We have something called a climate change task force. It kind of echoes some of the things that Ron's been saying. This is something that's coming at us from so many different directions: local, state, national level, and we better get, you know, to the table, engage, give our point of view, because this train is coming down the tracks at us in a big way. Might be an electric train, but at least. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to, you know, as an example. you know, and all the different issues that Andrew mentioned, you know, I would echo that, you know, lumber prices, crazy, you know, shortage of construction labor, you know, all the different things we need to talk about, you know, is you know, what we should be doing as a group. And I, you know, I just, as I said, I want to leave you with this is the association that you're part of on all these different levels really do a fantastic job of advocating. I don't know what we do without them. So, you know, I want to make sure you know, we maintain that support, that we get people to come to the Bring Housing Home program, we get you to come to the Build Pack events, and, you know, so I feel strongly about it. I hope you'll all participate. Did you want me to? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
I have a question for
Yeah, sure.
anybody.
Yeah, sure.
Where are we with the starter home program? Has that gone anywhere?
There have been 0 starter homes in the state.
Yeah, Ben knows about it. So, yeah, we talked a lot about it. We've tried to make it clear to people within the Baker administration. It got tangled up with, you know, what, Ben, you know more about it than I do. Why don't you speak to that? It got tangled up with a lot of different, very gnarly regulations, and it just made it harder and harder to bet.
Right. So that is one of our greatest disappointments is the lack of progress or success of the starter home program. So we've been talking about this for some time, and to some degree, it was put a little bit on the back burner with the push for the Housing Choices Bill. But I had spoken to Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, Mike Keneally, that once Housing Choice passes, becomes law, that this is one of the regulatory issues we very much want to work on with his office. Because those regulations that were promulgated by DHCD to implement the program was done not on his watch. He wasn't the secretary then. It was under Secretary Jay Ash and under Undersecretary Crystal Cornegay. But we have a new secretary and we have a new undersecretary. So there's 2 problems fundamentally. One is the regulations themselves. The regulations are far too cumbersome, burdensome, and costly, not only from the developer's perspective, right? Your ability, right, to go through that, but actually from the perspective of the town. When I sat in on the advisory committee that DHCD put together, John Smolak and I worked on this, there were a number of municipal town planners who were there. And they said repeatedly that for a small suburban or ex-urban community where you have a part-time planner or maybe one town planner, even if the community was interested in zoning for a starter home district, to be able to comply with all of the bureaucratic requirements that have to be submitted, many of them said, you know, I just don't have the time for this. I've got too much work, too many, you know, projects to review. I have to advise the planning board. I have to do my, you know, other planning, zoning articles and so on. You know, it's just too much of a lift, even if I wanted to do that. And we, you know, we said that repeatedly, that it's not just an issue for the developers, it's an issue for a community. Secondly, the starter home program, when we initially proposed it, we saw this as a standalone program. You know, unfortunately, the legislature and the administration, in fairness, combined it into the Smart Growth Law, Chapter 40R. And in doing so, it really is in some ways in contradiction with that law, because the Smart Growth Zoning and Housing Production Law is all about housing production, denser housing production near a train station or a bus station and so on. And we knew, by the way, when that law was passed in 2004, that it wasn't going to create, you know, single family housing. It might create some mixed use projects and multifamily projects, you know, in the right location. So it's a little bit contradictory when we're trying to build smaller starter homes, you know, in suburban communities, a law which is really focused more on an urban kind of situation. But the other problem, and I've been talking to legislators about this, and in fact, I spoke to Representative Arcero about this, is that remember the whole law, starter home, smart growth, is a incentive-based law. It provides financial incentives to cities and towns if they will zone for housing. Well, those incentives were established in the law in 2004. Those incentives are the communities pay $2,500 per occupancy permit or building permit issued for each unit of housing. And in addition, they get what's called a zoning incentive payment. That is, they get some money that they can use any way they want. And the amount of money they get is based upon how large the zoning district is. But if I recall correctly, the maximum amount that a community would get was something like $60,000 or so. Well, the fact is, those financial incentives were insufficient in 2004 to motivate a community. They're certainly insufficient in 2021. So one of the things that I've raised with several key legislators, if they want to look at something that they could, move on and consider, is updating Chapter 40R so that those financial incentives for cities and towns, zoning incentive payments and payments for each individual unit that's actually built, are substantially increased to be more of an incentive. So work on that piece through the legislature, and we really need the administration to fundamentally overhaul the regulations which are really standing in the way of such development. Remember, that law requires, for starter home districts, the lots cannot exceed 1/4 acre. So imagine if you had 1/4 acre lots to build a home. You'd be able to build homes that were much more affordable and attainable to average families. The law does, of course, restrict the size, limit the size of the house, and we had a lot of negotiation around this. So they cannot exceed 1,850 square feet of heated living space. So it's not your garage and your attic and so on. That still should produce a nice home for a young family on a lot that they could afford. I repeatedly tell legislators, this is the kind of housing our members cannot build because of restrictive zoning. And then, of course, when we add on all of the costs that you're dealing with today with the cost of materials and labor and so on. So thank you for raising that, Lillian. That is something we want Secretary Keneally, and it's something we'll be raising with the Lieutenant Governor, who's interested in some, what ideas or what else can the administration do as we move beyond now the passage of the housing choice law. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah,
Ben.
I'll add to that, Lillian. My father got started in the business in like 1953 by building like 1,400 square foot capes for $9,000. So those days are long gone. When it comes to inflation. Yeah, right. But that's how people got on the housing ladder.
Absolutely.
So while we have everybody here, we have Gary, Rob, Jim, Ben, Andrew, and Larry. Does anybody have any questions? You've got a pretty good dream team here.
Yeah, and by and large, just to accentuate that, I mean, we're here to kind of like funnel your thoughts through the system, through the state and international level. So by all means, let us know what's on your mind, whatever your concerns are, we're here for you.
I have a question for Andrew Topakowski. My biggest concern right now, like a project coming up, I know you've mentioned lumber, but is there a solution that you see down the road for lumber becoming more affordable? I mean, just on a project since we did a pro forma on January 4th, we did one last week, and the lumber went up almost $700,000. So it's almost becoming like, no, we're not going to know. That's with the brakes on.
Guys, I got about every other word there. So somebody who's closer to.
Can you hear? I'm gonna have to move this. Can you hear me, Andrew? He asked you.
I can.
What are we gonna do? Is there anything in the future that makes lumber prices get back to normal?
Yes and no. I think the first is investment in plant and equipment, which is going to take time. I really do believe that's going to take time. Secondly, we as an association have tracked building permits sort of sporadically, but if you believe NAHB's numbers about Massachusetts, we only are pulling permits for about 50% of what we pulled a decade ago, and yet we still have an enormous shortage. So there's some gaps, if you will, in the data to try and sort of bridge that. Where is really all of this lumber going? For a long time, it was Canadian softwood lumber. The issue was tariffs. That has backed itself off. The real issue at the moment is supply and demand. There's massive demand for for product, whether it's framing lumber, OSB, plywood, doesn't really matter. It's all sort of off the charts. I fear that with inflation and price inflation, that if we are building less going forward because people will be able to buy less homes, the lumber pricing issue may settle itself back down later this year, but it will be at the cost of us not building as many homes nationally. So the issue really is one of supply and demand.
It's almost like we need a recession to get it back.
No, don't laugh at that.
No, I'm just saying, it seems to me that that's the only thing that's gonna pull it back.
There's one more piece to that. So in the state rep group that I was in, another Zoom call for national, one of the state reps is out of Montana, and she's a landowner, and they sell lumber. And her problem was not that the price of the trees is gone up because they haven't seen any extra money. Their problem was twofold. There was one, the operator at the lumber mill is actually collecting more money at home. That's the first problem. The second problem is most of the guys that were driving the trucks had to go do something else because everything shut down. So now they've got a lot of this stuff piled up and they can't move it. So they've got a backup of trees, basically. And then they've got the problem where once it actually gets to the yard, they can't put the volume through, even with the systems that they have in place. So she was actually going to be part of a meeting later this week and was going to feed us back the information if she had heard anything on the Montana side of how that was going to come down. But my gut instinct is not till December, when everybody really figures out that they're not going to get any more money from the government, that they're going to have to go find a job.
It'll filter itself out. The one good thing we have, and Lillian is going to tell Demetrius and others, I saw a chart today that if you haven't seen it, apparently I asked the question to Brigitte Senkel, who's been doing this business a long, long time, have you ever seen this before? And the answer I got back was never. So this is a chart of what asking price is versus what the offering price is. And forever, obviously you offer less than the asking price. And every heard once in a while that the offering price is higher than that. But this is all the Merrimack Valley, whatever the chart was, the Carlisle Concord area. And it's always a little bit below. Sometimes they get cut close. It never goes above. How can you be above average? I'm not talking one house or two houses. Today, or the last month, the asking price was below the final price. First time ever. And I don't know if you've seen that here in Andover.
Not yet, but I'll tell you an example. One of the places that we have a really great relationship with called me last week. He was doing an appraisal on a property, would not divulge the property address to me, but had some questions about it and wanted some of my thoughts. Then advised me, and I'm dying to find out when it closes what property it is. The offer that came in, it's an Andover property, came in $300,000 over asking price. $300,000. If the market sneezes.
If it was $3 million, it'd still be a lot.
Yeah, but the average that we're seeing locally, Merrimack Valley and even Middlesex, average is a minimum of 50,000 over asking, and we go up to 125, 150 over.
I'm paying 150 to $200.
Easy.
But go back to, I called you actually, remember when we were selling our house?
Yeah.
So we sold our house for more than asking. The appraisal comes in at less than the offer, and they expect me to take the haircut. I had gotten burned on a previous $1 million multifamily sale, and we put a clause in that said, I don't give a shit, in plain English, what the appraisal comes back at.
Legal language?
I was so upset. So in the multifamily,
Lawyer's name.
yeah.
Lawyer doesn't give a shit.
In the multifamily world, I mean, we sold it 1.2. The appraisal came back at 1.1. It was a cash sale. I had to take $100,000 haircut if I wanted that to go.
That's because you have the wrong agent working for you, because the language should have been put in there that it was not subject to appraisal.
It was a cash sale. It was a cash sale.
But it should have been subject to no appraisal. We don't allow anybody on our listings, any of our sellers, to take an offer that doesn't have not subject to appraisal with proof of funds showing us they have the money to take out of their pocket to meet that delta.
It wouldn't have mattered.
Like the point I'm trying to make, and everybody's making here, is the economy is booming in our business.
Yeah.
Partly because of Ben's work and others in keeping us busy this last year. Can you imagine what it would be if we weren't doing anything? And the fact that the interest rates are low and all the other great things that are happening in our industry right now, it's absorbing the lumber problem. But ultimately, somebody, Tom mentioned recession. Do not look for recession. And then everything else is collapsing. Well, we'll get the logistics things. Russell, if you don't know Russell Leonard, he serves with Mark Leff on the utility committee. Russ Leonard is usually the MC for most of these events. Good friend of Carol, and he wants to say something.
I'm just going to add to that lumber increase a little bit. You know, we've been looking at these lumber prices increasing for some time, and obviously it's very concerning. But we're seeing other pressure now on that pricing. Now, like Romex in my business, you order 50,000 feet of Romex, they ship us 5,000. You order 500 plastic boxes, they send us 50. You know, houses we can't put wire because we can't buy it, and the price of Romex now is climbing to this double. Now, Romex in the housing market is the main material piece in that building process. We're going to be seeing electrical pricing have a lot more pressure financially on these houses. Now, I'm going to prepare the builders for that because I don't think a lot of them are aware, because we're focused on lumber prices. And we're seeing now these types of increases as well, which are going to add to the problem moving forward, and make it more difficult to make these numbers work. And what has saved us, as we all know in this room, is the fact that the inflated sale prices have made up for the fact that we're adding all this money onto the front end of the bill. So I'm just a little more nervous now that we're not just dealing with lumber prices, but now we're dealing with other material increases, and I think we all should be aware of that.
One of the crazy things was that back in 07, 08, a lot of people got into trouble because they were doing spec houses, and then all of a sudden the market fell off. But then it was all custom built after that. Now you almost want to do the opposite. Now you want to do spec house, right? Because
I heard national builders are jumping out of contracts. I talked about it with Brian Lucy last month. National builders must have a provision that they could call their buyers up and say, okay, we don't have a deal anymore because my prices just went up.
Yeah.
Now I looked at my own contracts and it's not there. Brian looked at his, he doesn't think it's there. But maybe national builders that have gone through this kind of thing before, put it in there. Where you can call the buyer and say, I can no longer sell you this house for $900,000. So.
What I don't understand is with all the technology today, with 3D imaging, why can't we duplicate lumber, Romex, and all these other things that there's a shortage of?
But with what raw material? Oil? I mean, you're gonna make it with something.
They are
Oh,
doing
that's-
3D houses now.
What's that?
They are doing it. Yes, they are.
Development of 3D
Yeah.
printed homes.
I mean, I think it's something that we are, the Builder Association, maybe needs to look into.
Andrew, add that to your list.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes.
Add it to the list.
All right, Russell, go ahead.
Remember what you said about the builder. I think what's going to follow is you're going to see subcontractors saying that price is good for 5 days or 10 days. So I want the builders to be prepared for that. I mean, I know contractors, subs that are actually backing out on some of their projects because, they quoted them 6 months ago and they would lose money if they did them. So
I got an HVAC man that won't give me a price. He's not starting because he knows that I won't let him start without a price. He has to give me a price.
how do you plan then if that's the case,
Right now, I've already told my buyers, listen, I don't know when I'm gonna be able to sell you the house. Just be prepared
That's
because.
going to slow the market down, I think.
Yeah. it is.
That's the only way it's gonna work. Well, Jeff, it's not just lumber prices, but it's also prices. It's a huge impact on a lot of life developers, especially, commercial.
Hold on, Carol.
And one thing I wanted to mention was, you know, we're talking about the price of housing and just involved. Most of what we do is off, about 85% of what we do is off market. My investors are willing to go, you're talking about appraisal prices. I have investors willing to go 30% over appraisal. So they can have the opportunity to get something off market. Just for that reason, because of the lack of inventory, 30% over.
These margins are unheard of before. These numbers we're talking about, it's 188%. I went to my lumber salesman and I said, okay, so what are you doing with all your money? You going to, you know, Tahiti and all this? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, think about it. You have the same staff, you have the same truckers, you have the same operation, and you're making 88% more money. So where's that money going? My margin's got to come down. Has anybody else asked you? I want my margin. He goes, no, we're not lowering our margin. Oh, yes, you are. For me, you are. And he's looking at that. But where all these lumber guys, your Romex supplier, they're making more money. If they could charge more and the same operation, they're stealing from us. So
Most people, they're paying on the other end. The middle guy's not making any more money because he's
but if
paying.
he's selling something for 188% of what he used to pay for it, it's the same product. His operation is the same. He has the same facility. He's the same salesman. He has the
So
same.
he's paying more.
Yep. He's paying more money. And his margin, his 2% margin, his 1% margin has now been doubled. If I'm working on a margin.
Let me ask Andrew, what incentive would a Georgia Pacific have to open up another mill? They can sell product for less money? It's me.
It's a terrific question. The answer is they have to be incentivized, right? And the ability to start a new plant with, I mean, think about what it takes for us to get something permitted, even in the South, where most of the lumber is processed. Think about what it's going to take for them, not just the plant and equipment and the loans, but the permitting to get something like that accomplished as we move into the next 4 years of increased regulatory oversight. So I got to tell you, I'm not particularly, I don't particularly believe that there's going to be a significant amount of investment in the plant and equipment that's necessary. And Larry, I think, said it well. There's an awful lot of lumber out there. There's not a whole lot of processing. It's sort of, trying to fit something through a squirt gun when you need, a hose. And that's really what the issue is. And I wish I could say to you, supply and demand is going to solve the problem and people are going to invest. I think there's an awful lot of regulatory impediments that are there that are going to keep lumber artificially high for a goodly period of time.
Thank you.
All right, it's 5:30. We're going to have a tour of Lillian's facility upstairs and get some of that wine. We need to close this up. So Carol has a few comments and closing ideas. So go ahead, Carol.
Just about the next events, I'm really glad you guys are here. It's great to see you in person or when you join the Zoom. I just want to make it so important that you guys are what helps the association continue with your dues, with coming to these meetings, and all these people that you see on your behalf are volunteers. So it's real important. If you do have something you want to ask, just email me and I'll get you in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with locally at the state. Click on those links for the state, the local, and the national associations for any questions. Or if you can't find the answer, just email me and I have access to people at the state and Andrew and Rob and just communicate. That's what I'm trying to say, because you guys are all part of this. It's such a great organization. I just want you all to feel like you belong and you're important and your input matters. Our next meeting is one I developed to appreciate the membership. It's a membership appreciation meeting. It's at Lindsay's in Drake-It on May 20th. It's from 4 to 6. We're going to have a tabletop event. So if anybody wants to bring their stuff to hand out to builders and other members of your products, that's a great time to do it. We're going to do it, socially distancing, whatever the rules are that day. But anyway, it'll be fun. And so we're trying to get as many of these events up and going again, just to see everybody and get them together. Then on Tuesday, June 9th, we have the state installation banquet, which is going to be the Pine Hills Golf Club in Plymouth. It's from 5 to 8. We are going to be chartering a bus. So if you guys don't want to make that drive, get in touch with me. We're going to have a bus. It's really fun.
It's really fun.
I'm only serving white wine this year, because last year Mark left looking to get shot because of red wine. We have wine, we have fun. We go down there. Penny Hamill is our legend of the industry this year.
guys can join us, it's great. And it's a wonderful, wonderful event.
Before you jump off of that, all these people that we talked about, so many Northeast Builder members are so involved. And you may say to yourself, I want to get involved too. I want to be part of this. These are my friends. All these people that I see that we've introduced, other than maybe Jim Marcero, because he's a politician, but no, they're all my friends. And we've become friends. And you do that because you got to take a step forward. How do you take that first step forward? Can you be on the golf committee? Can you do what I do in the wetlands? Well, if you're not a wetlands guy, then you can't do that. But what you can do is you can go to the state installation banquet and get to meet other people, other members from the state. And that's, I would say, is a great first step. So it doesn't take much. You get a bus, we have a good time. You get to know the people in this association better with drinks in hand. You get to go down to Plymouth. If you want, we're going to be playing golf that day. If you're a golfer, you can join us to play golf. I would say that that's the best first step you could take. And if you can't do it this year for some reason, do it next year. But think about getting involved, and that's how you meet Gary and become friends with Gary and get invited over to Gary's house. Is you do these things. So go ahead, Carol.
So that's important. And also, Gary didn't touch too much on it yet, but the Area 1 caucus, which I don't think anybody likes the word caucus. The Area 1 is the region of the National Associations of Home Builders. Area 1 of the New England states. And every year we get together. We are probably going to.
We are, we're trying to do it in the fall.
And just go to that meeting. That's awesome because you get to talk to people in all the other New England states that are probably going through the same things you guys are. And it's just a great way to get involved. You don't really have to do anything, but just to be able to talk to these other people, it's just a wonderful event. I don't think we play that up enough, but
you got to take the first step forward. You have to say, I want to go. You have to get out of your comfort zone and say, yes, I want to go to something that I don't know anything about. I don't know anybody, and I'll go and I'll give it a try. So I suggest you do that.
And then June 14th is our golf tournament. We did have to move it to Indian Ridge Country Club. This is our 35th annual event. This is our biggest fundraiser. We need these fundraisers to keep the lights on at NEBA, so that's an important thing to either sponsor or come and help or golf. And if you don't golf, you can always buy a foursome or a single and give it to your best employee, your mother, your father. You have an incentive if you're in sales that whoever has the best sales that for the month of May gets to golf. And golfing is great if you golf, but even if you don't and you want to go that night and hang out, it's a great day to spend with people on a different level. You're not showing up on a job site. You're seeing them on a one-to-one basis in the comfort zone that they like. And it's just a really fun event.
Is it going to be like last year or can it be like?
No, we're gonna shotgun start. We have food and we can, I don't have to wear gloves. and
Normal
masks
start.
and- Yeah, you'll be able to pick up your golf ball and everything. So I want to thank Jeff for doing a great job this evening. And Ryan for our IT, connecting us with Rob. Thank you, Rob. Very important for me, Rob. I just wanted everybody to understand how much you guys impact, like what Rob does and Gary does and Jeff and Andrew. It's all because of you that they do this. So I just think it's very important. We are also going to.
One more thing. I want to challenge, Carol and I want to challenge everybody in this room, and we took a roster of who's here to bring in 2 new members each by June 1st.
Right, because May 31st, from May 1st to May 31st, we have a membership challenge. We're at National Association, we registered. We're up against the other associations. Our association will get more money if you do have somebody sign up during the month of May. And you'll also get spike credits, extra spike credits. And if you don't know what a spike is, when you bring in a member, you get a spike. And it's a real important way to just contribute without really doing a whole lot. Just recommend or talk to anybody. And I have a whole list that I can send out to everybody, people you may not think about that you do business with, but because you give them business because of this association, they should get involved. They don't have to be builders, they don't have to be realtors, they don't have to be bankers, they could be anybody, your accountant, your realtor, your partner in your office. We have a lot of secretaries that are affiliate members because they're the ones going to the, getting the permits and helping out in the office. So anybody can join and be a part of this association. Association. So with that being said, there's food upstairs on the 3rd floor, which is an awesome 3rd floor. So we can go up.
I know, I'm sorry, the sun's not out.
How do we get there?
Up here, elevator or the stairs?
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Gary? Yeah.